So today here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, we're going to dive into something that really is critical to talk about, which is the true nature of the environmental movement in America today, which doesn't seem to be just about conservation and about being good stewards of our environment, but about so much more than that, a political agenda and almost a sort of religiosity to it. That's why I'm so pleased today to be joined by Witt. He is with PragerU and host of their brand new short documentary called Religion of Green, and he joins me now here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Will, welcome to the show. It's good to have you, sir.
Thanks, man. It's good to be back.
Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
There is a sort of doctrine now that you're supposed to believe in the media and on college campuses. You go to college campuses very often, interviewing students, getting their take on things. And it seems like if you get away from this doctrine, you are violating some sort of very core tenet. Talk to us a little bit about this idea and the genesis for Religion of Green.
Yeah, well, let's think about it. Think about something as innocuous as recycling a plastic straw, right? People get that blue bin and they have it out on their curb or in their house, and they throw away that plastic straw into the blue bin, and it makes them feel good about themselves. It makes them feel like, oh, I'm doing something to really help the environment. I'm doing my part. I'm doing my cause. But then when it comes down to it and you actually look at what recycling does, it's, in a lot of ways, as we expose in the documentary, a hoax. But the left has convinced people that these things that they think are actually doing are that they think they're really good, they think they're morally right, when in reality they're not actually that helpful. And then what happens if you don't recycle? Let's say you just throw that plastic straw right into the garbage. You get called a terrible person. It's an immoral thing to do when it comes to the left and their religion. So we decided to make Religion of Green kind of to not just expose this when it comes to recycling, but expose how this sort of mindset, this mantra, gets its way into the popular culture right now, and how people are so afraid and scared of this apocalyptic world when in reality they don't have much to fear at all.
Yeah, so when you're going to college campuses and you're talking to college students in particular who have been coming up in our education system in America on these campuses where, again, it is doctrine, it is just assumed to be the way things are and the way things ought to be, what is the sense that you're getting? Because as I was watching the documentary, Religion of Green, Witt, I was definitely catching that there is not just a sense of concern, but among many of these, there is this apocalyptic notion about what might be around the corner in just a matter of maybe even 12 years.
Yeah, I've done a couple of videos, not even just this Religion of Green, but other videos where I've interviewed people when it comes to the topic of climate change. And man, they think the world is ending. They think the polar bears are dead. They think everything that could go wrong is going wrong, and we only have 12 years left. And the crazy thing about it is that they think that the government is the one who has to do something about it. The government are going to be the ones to solve all their problems. And so that's why the left does this, because it's so powerful. They use fear and they say the world is ending. And then the left comes in and says, look, I'm the only person, I'm the only politician who cares about climate change because the world's going to end. You have to vote for me. You have to put me into office because otherwise the world is over. So when you're a 21-year-old kid and you hear that the world is no longer going to be around as you get older unless you believe in your government fully or you believe in these leftist politicians, and of course you're going to side with them. So it's a terrible brainwashing that is happening on the college campuses, and the majority of people think that the world is going to end.
One thing that, look, the title is pretty stark, Religion of Green. And I think that this is so fitting. Look, back in a decade ago when I was a student at Regis University, I was hosting a conservative political talk show. And I remember talking about the Reverend Al Gore, head potentate and grand prophet of the Church of Climate Change of Latter-day Liberals. And now you've got AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's a priestess in this Church of Climate Change of Latter-day Liberals. And what's so striking to me is that things have not changed in the last decade. They've only gotten worse, and it really has become a sort of priesthood or religious fervor of sorts.
Well, it's funny that you mention that things are getting worse in that sense, because they are. these people are getting more and more dogmatic. They're getting stronger with the things that they say. I mean, many of these people, like Bill McKibben, claim that humans are a parasite on the earth. But the funny thing about that is that as these people get more fervent about their ideals, the world is becoming a cleaner place and a better place to live. You know, there are more trees in the northern hemisphere than there were 100 years ago. Natural disasters are people are dying from them much less, 90% less than the last 100 years. I mean, the world is becoming a better and safer place and cleaner place for people to live, but they continue to push this apocalypse. And you look at Al Gore, I mean, his movie Inconvenient Truth that came out in, I forget exactly what year, in the 2000s, but I mean, that was the religion of these people. That was like their Bible watching this movie. And now you look in 2020, I mean, the polar bears were supposed to be dead. Mount Kilimanjaro was supposed to have no snow on it. And it's like none of the things that he talked about actually happened, but they're allowed to continue to profess this doctrine, this religion of green, regardless, because it's just no one ever actually goes out and proves them wrong.
Well, and there is no sense of a need to challenge things on college campuses, for example, when you have this idea that you've had ingrained in you for really your entire life. I mean, I remember first being introduced to global warming and that threat when I was in middle school, which is in the early 2000s. And then in high school is when I first encountered An Inconvenient Truth. That's when Al Gore came out with that film. And what's so stunning to me is just the mentality of these people. They're unwilling even to engage on the ideas and have a conversation because it's just the way things are. You're not supposed to challenge it. And that's where I think you're really getting at something here with the religion of green idea, because in, let's go centuries back, when you couldn't challenge church doctrine, you were seen as a heretic. That's exactly the kind of mentality here if you challenge any of the conventional notions about the environmental movement, for example.
Oh, yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, if you challenge these things, you get canceled. You get told that you don't care about the earth. You want animals to die. You're fine with our planet going extinct. And these are the kind of things that they do to shame you. I mean, it's the exact same thing as we see with the BLM movement right now, Black Lives Matter. Like, if you don't post a black square on your Instagram, right? If you don't post a black square, it means you don't care about black people, or you don't care about Black Lives Matter, and you're a bad person, right? All these celebrities and people who had to post black squares, because if they didn't, then the mob would have come after them. So when we see these people protesting and rioting, not just for BLM, but for, you know, something like Extinction Rebellion with climate change, it's not just because they think their ideas are right. It's because this religion is so ingrained in them that they think they have a moral responsibility, a moral ethical code to actually go and do this. So it's a really tough thing to fight against, and that's why we felt it was so important to make this documentary, because it is so important to change people's minds, and you really have to go in and change a lot of the values of who they are as people.
Again, we're talking with Will Witt, who hosts PragerU's new short documentary, Religion of Green. By the way, Will, where can people go to access the documentary?
Got to go to PragerU.com. It's right there on the homepage, Religion of Green. You can also go to PragerU.com and just search Religion of Green on there. It's on all over my social media, at the Will Witt and at PragerU.
Again, Will Witt, our guest here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. So I want to talk about this younger generation dynamic, because now we have Priestess AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the millennial savior and grand matriarch of the Church of Climate Change, of Latter-day Socialists. I mean, now we've gone beyond the Latter-day Liberals idea of Al Gore. Now we're going full Green New Deal. But there does seem to be this sense here that AOC is emblematic of an up-and-coming younger generation that has bought into this religion of green idea. Speak to that, especially from the college campus component, but also from those, say, you know, who are in their mid or later 20s, who are still encountering this. I mean, AOC's early 30s. So what do you make of that generational dynamic here?
Yeah, I mean, I just like you said, going into middle school, or it might have been even elementary school for me, I was bombarded with stuff about climate change, global warming, all of that. It was all I heard, you know, and my grandparents were conservative, and I would go in and talk about the things I learned at school, global warming, and they would tell me, no, it's, you know, not as big of a deal as people are making it out to be. And it was like, I didn't listen to them. I was like, oh, these are my old conservative grandparents. But it's like, that's what's happening with people all over the country, young people who from a very early age, you know, fifth grade, have been learning that global warming is real. Global warming is the biggest thing that we have to worry about. And of course, they're going to take that throughout their entire lives because it just gets pounded on them every single year of school by all of their friends, all over social media. The prevailing culture in Hollywood, the mainstream media is talking about it. All of the leftist politicians are talking about it. So when it's so strong and pushed at you from every single angle, then of course this is going to be the prevailing culture, because if you don't agree with it, then again you get shamed, you get ostracized in your communities.
However, one thing that shows how bad this has gotten is this sense that young people are now being told that if your parents are urging you, or at least asking you to question a little bit more, who are your parents or maybe or grandparents are not, as you were describing, on board with this and suggesting maybe, yeah, it's not as hysterical as you think or as alarmist as you think. There's this idea that you should just dismiss your parents because they don't know anything and they are unwilling to change and they don't care. And you know better as a young person than your ignorant elders. And that's a mentality that isn't just in regards to climate change and the environmental movement, but in a variety of different areas that has deeply concerned me about the trajectory of our younger generations right now, Will Witt.
Yeah, well, look at the again, going into the whole religion of it, they are getting rid of Judeo-Christian values. One of the 10 commandments is honor your mother and father, and they're basically getting away with that. Don't honor your mother and father, honor the earth. The earth is God, the earth is Mother Nature, right? This is what you should hold above all else. And that's what they've really transformed this into. And that's a really scary thing because it's making people not respect the family, the nuclear family in America, and it's not making them respect the actual institutions that made this country great.
One thing in Religion of Green that you and your guests talk about is, in terms of the religiosity here, is that on the left, there tends to be more of a secular nature. They're more atheistic. And so there isn't this grounding in God and faith in God. And so they have to replace it with something. And environmentalism seems to be the way that they're going. Expand upon that idea a little bit.
Yeah, Nietzsche, the 18th century German philosophers, had the famous word that said, God is dead. A lot of you guys might have heard that before. But although a lot of atheists will take this and say it's a celebration, Nietzsche was celebrating that God is dead. He was an atheist all his life, but he really used this as a warning for people to know that as America and the West shifted away from these Judeo-Christian values, people would still need some sort of meaning in their lives. And so you had communism, you had Malthusianism, and then eventually now you have this environmental movement, this green movement that has become this meaning in people's lives.